Hi, welcome back. So this is going to be video number 4 in our Introduction to Maya series. And basically, we're going to show you this time our UVs. Now, we're not going to get really in-depth into the UVs, but we are going to I'm going to show you and talk about UVs, what they're for, why we use them. And we are going to create some UVs, but they're going to be just real simple UVs that are just going to be used for the next lesson, which will be in creating and adding materials with textures to them. So I'm just going to kind of explain the process, what a UV is, kind of the way we use it, and we're going to go from there. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, so again, here's our, we just opened up Maya, and I'm going to go ahead and set my project. And again, I'm going to set it to my current project that I'm using. And then I'm going to go to File. And I'm going to go ahead and open scene all the way up here at the top. And all my windows are opening up on my other screen. So sorry for that. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this project. Do not save the blank screen there. Okay, so this is where we left off. We still have this big screen up here in the way. We can't select it because, again, it's hidden. So if I go over here to my channel box, right here, we're just going to go ahead and hide this. We could delete it, but right now it's not really doing anything, and we can just remove it from being seen. All right, so let's go ahead and now work on some of the other things. All right, so the dome back here, I'm going to click on that, and I'm also going to delete that. You can either delete it by clicking in the scene or over here. We're going to delete that because we use a different dome when we work with our materials and textures. And this kind of gets me right down to our ant. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the head first. Actually, let's start with a little bit easier piece maybe. We'll start with this bottom part of the body, okay? And we're going to create UVs for each part of the ant so that there is a UV at least, so when we put these textures on, the textures will kind of lay out. They may not be 100% perfect because, like I said, this is an introduction, and we're going to talk more about what a UV is than actually going through the entire process and having you follow me through on creating UVs for this. I have some other videos that do some simple UVs and show you the process of how to create a custom UV. All right, so with this selected, we're going to go up here. We're going to be in the modeling mode for Maya. And then up here under UV, I'm going to click on UV. And I'm going to open up the UV editor. And when I open that up, this is what I get. Okay, this is the basically what because we started off as a sphere, right? So this started off as a round sphere. And when we cut open a sphere, it basically, like a map, when you try to lay it flat, you're going to have these jagged edges up here on either end. And when you kind of wrap this around, it's going to be, you're going to try to make it more like a sphere that wraps around a three-dimensional object, a round object. So in the UV editor, across the top we have things like edit, so copy, paste, delete. You can do some pinning and unpinning. We're going to use this one here in a second, but we can assign shaders, have automatic, camera based. Those are different types of UVs that you can create instead of just a standard UV that we see right here. Select, again, this is different processes of how you want to select different pieces of the UV. When we go to modify UVs, there will be some of these things that will need to be done. Cut, sew, split, merge. These are all things that make it so that you can modify or custom cut your UVs and shape them and position them the way that you want. Modify is the same thing. A lot of different things that you can do with the UVs here. And I will use some of these in some of my other videos. Of course, there are tools and things you can do, cut, grab, pin, pinch, all this stuff. You can change the view that we currently have. This is for image, so when we do have textures, you can adjust the way the image looks in your scene here behind the UV, so you can kind of see how the UV lays over the images. well, the images lay under the UV, I guess. Different textures. You can set up UV sets, name them, things like that, and then of course help. Across here are some other tools that we would use. So this right here is the standard wireframe view. This, when I click on it, the color indicates which way up the UV is. Blue is what you want to see. If it's flipped to the wrong direction, it'll be red. And we can show you that real quick here if I go to modify. And here it is, flip right here. If I hit just flip it, you'll see now that basically I'm seeing the underside or the inside of the UV, and it's red. This is not what you want to see unless you're also trying to modify that in some way. So now to move this around, you can hold the Alt button and left mouse button, you pan it, middle mouse button, zoom in and out. Okay. So let's go ahead and unflip this. I'm gonna hit Control Z, put it back the way it's supposed to be. Let's turn that off. And then here, if we had stretching and distortion in the UV, this is what you'll see. You'll see these various colors. White means that there is no distortion, and you can see that varying shades up to red is where it gets worse. So here, because this was a sphere, we're going to have a lot of distortion across the center point where the sphere was. Well, actually, this is where it was cut. And we can see where it was cut if I open this up. We'll go back over here. See this white line across here? Let me turn that off for a second. Right across here you can see there's that white line, and then this is the end points where all those ends were cut, and it would be the same way on the inside there. And it was just cut in one point to lay this out flat, with these being cut so that you can lay it all out flat. So you can kind of get a view. So this is the end of the sphere, and then this is that area that was cut along the back of the bug, right along here. Okay, so but if we think about it, this is actually set up like a sphere. It's not laid out the way we want it to. And that's, before I get done with that, let me go back to distortion real quick. So when we take a look at the actual model with distortion turned on, you can see a lot of distortion here. This will be stretching. The textures that we put in there will be stretched. They won't look correct. They'll look okay right around here where the white is, and then this blue area is also an area of distortion and stretching, and it won't look correct there either. So let's go ahead and turn this off. Now, what we really want to do is we want this UV to be more correct with the shape of what we've turned it into. It's no longer a sphere, it is more like an egg shape, and that's not what is represented here with this UV. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead, and if we hold down the mouse button, right click and hold, you'll get these menus again. And these are, if you look, these are some of those menus that are along the top up there. You see we have create, select, cut, sew, modify. So a lot of the same stuff that's up along the top. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to UV shell, and we're going to select the UV shell, and when we do that, it highlights it all kind of an orangish color. And now, if you right click and hold again, we're going to go down to create, and we're going to select automatic. And what it does is it's going to cut this UV to be more representative of what our actual shape is. But it kind of does some weird stuff. If I hover over, you can see how these UV shells, let me pull this back in real quick, maybe you can see that a little better. When I hover over the model, you can see that the UV shells down here at the bottom highlight, and those are what's represented here on the model. Okay. But they're kind of cut in kind of a funny way. Now, the other thing about UVs is because we're putting a texture together, and well, let me just explain what these blue planes, think of these as like cameras, and what they're doing is they're taking a picture image of what this UV is like, and you can see that basically they're starting here at the center point, and our model is not exactly in the center point. I can move it back to line it up, but it does not really change anything. Okay. So anyway, to get rid of those, you can click off of it, and then click back on your model. I don't know. Let's see here. Come on. Okay, go back to object mode. pull back our model, bring it back up, and we can see that we have these kind of funky cuts in it. And these cuts are Maya's way of trying to optimize the UV automatically for you while getting rid of as much distortion as possible. So let's take a look, and you can see that we do have still some stretching, some blue here, some little bit of pink and red, but it's not as bad as it was before. And we could improve that, but I'm not going to really get into modifying UVs. We're just going to lay these out and let them be automatic and put our textures on. But one of the things we will notice when we do that is that let me turn that stretch thing off again. Along these lines right here, these are going to be seams. So your texture will have seams along these edges. So one of the things we want to do is we want to minimize where those seams are. And like I said, I'm just wanting to talk to you about UVs this time around because I don't want this introduction. This is an introductory course. I don't want it to get too complicated and get really deep down in the weeds on everything that you can do with Maya. And UVs can be very time consuming to get them laid out correctly. But what we do want to do is we want to get rid of that distortion that we see on all these, and by just slapping on automatic real quick, things are going to just kind of fall where they're going to fall this way. And just be aware that this process, other than a lot of times I'll start with doing the automatic cut and then I'll stitch it back together based off of what Maya has done, because it gets me 50 to 80% of the way there sometimes, and then I just have to fix them a little bit. But with this, we're just going to leave them alone for now, just so you see what a UV is, and then we're going to put some textures on in the next video, and we'll see how those textures look with the UVs that we have. You can kind of see why we want to stitch them and put them together. And like I said, I have some other videos that will show you kind of an introduction to how to put UVs out and lay them out so that your model looks the best that it can. So for the rest of these, what I'm going to do just real quickly is I'm going to select them, select the other parts of the model, and then I'm just going to come in here and we're just going to do create. We're just going to do automatic for all these. We're just going to let them fall out wherever they fall. Everything's not going to be as beautiful as it should be, and that's okay. Now the head is going to be a little bit more complicated because the head consists of the eyes and the antenna as well. So what we're going to do first for the head is, with it selected, we're going to go to create, and okay, we're going to go to create, and then go ahead and go to UV shell, do a marquee select of everything, create automatic, and it's going to lay everything out kind of messy, and it looks like it's all on top of each other. But if we take a look at each of the individual specific parts, if I click on the eye, let's go ahead and deselect everything else. So if I go over here to the ant, select the head and the eye, you'll see that the eye is now laid out by itself. The other eye, same, is laid out by itself. The antennas, which are kind of funky, they're kind of laid out by themselves there. And so is the other antenna. Okay. And then there's the head, which the head is laid out by itself as well, but because everything is subbed under it, the all of those pieces show up. But it is laid out by itself. You can see those pieces are here. Now, one of the things, reason why I'm pointing that out is one of the things you don't want to do is stack your UVs unless the parts of the model that you're stacking on top of each other are identical. You want the texture to be treated exactly the same, and it can be used to save space. Now, in the UV editor, the way that UVs work is that they need to be here in this square right here. And if you take a look at this, I'm going to click off the model so you can see what the screen looks like. All right, let's deselect. There we go. All right, so here, this is called the 0 to 1 area, work area. So your UV editor 0 to 1 is right in here. And you can see that because it's got a green line and a red line right here. So the y-axis is green, the red is the x-axis. And if I zoom out, you'll see that that is the only one that's like that, and it actually is here in the center of this much larger graph. Now you have all this workspace that you can lay things out on, you can work on, and even if you put them outside of this, they are going to get some treatment of the textures. But when you work with UVs, you're going to want to keep them here in this work area here, especially if we go to export the UV with the model. We're going to export the UV into another software that allows us to do some texturing, some custom texturing. Like one of the things you can do that in is Photoshop. You also can use it in Substance Painter, and also in Quixel. When you go to use color ID and things like that. And I know I'm saying a lot of things that you haven't learned yet, but there's a lot of things that you use UVs for. Okay, so that is kind of how we want it to be laid out. You want to make sure it's put into here. You're going to maximize the space the best you can. You don't want anything hanging over these edges because it will get left out if you do an export, and you won't be able to control it quite as well. And again, here, this is a checkerboard. So one of the things about the checkerboard is if I select part of the model, I turn on the checkerboard, you can see that because of the automatic method that Maya used, these are looking like squares for the most part. Okay, and that's what you want, is the checkerboard to look like a checkerboard. You want it to be square, and you want it to be lined up. And you can see really here where these seams are going to be. So you can see that we're going to have, if we have textures that are very apparent and obvious to be able to see seams on, you're going to be seeing seams at these locations. But on other sections that we haven't done that to yet, if I click this leg, for example, and I kind of zoom in on it, so we haven't created a UV for this, you can see that these are no longer squares, they're distorted. They are out of shape, okay? And you know, some are going to be a little bit better than others. The other thing about it is you want the squares to be the same size. You don't want to have little tiny ones and then big ones, because basically what that's doing is this is a different scale, so your texture will be smaller here, whereas the texture will be larger here. And since this is all one piece, you want the texture to look the same, right? So some things to think about. This is still pretty much a sphere, but you can tell it's oblong as well. So that's why we do these UVs, okay? So let's go ahead, and I'm going to go ahead and select that piece there, and maybe I'll just work up from here. So I'm going to go through, and I'm going to do the same process for all of these pieces. I'm going to pause the video right here. I kind of walked through it, but I'm going to go ahead and do that. Actually, maybe I'll hold off on that for just a second. I'm going to do one leg. I'll show you the leg, and then you're just going to repeat that leg 5 other times. So I'll pause it after that. So this is the foot. Again, nothing really to it. You just select it, do an automatic. Okay, and then if we take a look at the foot now, our UVs should be of the same scale on the ends there, and we shouldn't have any distortion. The same thing with the, now if we're going to do it this way, we got to keep going back to object mode. Okay, and you can see that each of the subs are created there, so this might work out if we just go ahead and select it all the way at the top. Go ahead to create, and let me go ahead and do a UV shell, do a marquee select of everything, and then create, and we're going to do automatic. And what should have happened is all of our textures should now be correct. You'll see that the globe has smaller squares than the leg, so the texture is going to be on there is going to be a little bit different than the rest of the model. And we could scale those, and I'll show you how to scale them real quick. So everywhere where I have the joint, right, where it says joint, if I select that joint there, it's not going to deselect everything for me. All right, we're going to leave them alone for right now, but one thing we can do is you can scale these to be able to match the scale of the rest of the leg. But the textures we're going to use aren't going to be all that highly detailed, so it probably won't be noticed, or maybe it'll even look better with it being a little bit different on the joints. So we'll see. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and let you do the other 5 legs just the same way I just did this one. Okay, so I'm back, and I don't know why I didn't think about this at the time, but we could select all of the legs at the same time, do a marquee select, and then just do automatic, and it'll create all the UVs at once for each of those pieces. And then if you go into object mode, you can see that they'll break out. And it's going to lay them all out. They're all going to be laid out individually. Okay, so that should be everything for just this real quick UV. And again, UVs are very important to the model making process, especially when you're using textures. Now, the material that we did before, where we just colored it, not quite so imperative if you're using one solid color. Sometimes there may be some stretching that would be visible if you're using a multiple colored setup or something, but really it does not really show up. So, but with texturing, when we're using color maps and things like that, then yeah, you're going to see that stretching, and those are things that we need to fix. Let me see, the other thing, okay, so one thing I noticed, when I click on the little grid here for the checkerboard, it shows up down here, but you can also see it here. So by turning on the image right here, you can see the checkerboard behind this as well, and you can turn it off. Now, if we had a texture set up for this, that's also how you would turn the texture on and off. You'd have the checkerboard off, and you can turn it on like this right here. Actually, we do have a material assigned to it right now. It's red, so there you go. So you can see the red to it. Okay. This camera right here, we would use this camera if we were going to export these UVs, and there's probably some other things we didn't really get into right now. We don't need to. Those will be for future videos when we get into specifically laying out UVs and getting a little bit more fancy than what we just did. Okay, so that is it for this video. I didn't really want to make this very long. I just kind of wanted to introduce you to UVs, let you see what they are, kind of where they come from, and kind of talk you through a concept about them just a little bit, and let you cut them out of your model, because in the next video we're going to apply some materials. May not look super spectacular, but because of the UVs aren't laid out exactly the way you would normally lay them out. But it's a start, and you'll get to see how this works. All right, so I will go ahead and stop the video. If you liked what you saw, please like my video. And if you want to see some of the previous videos, see some of the other things I'm doing with Unreal Engine, some other Maya projects, and a couple of Unity projects I have in there right now with more Unity to come, then go ahead and subscribe to my channel. Check me out at Putting on the Fritz 3D Visualization. Like the video, subscribe. I'll see you next time.